This is problem number 29 from your skills review. And if your algebra skills are a little bit rusty, this problem, I'm sure, can be quite challenging. So I'm going to work through this one for you. And the particular example that we have here, which is f of x equals 5x squared minus 7x plus 5, is fairly typical for this kind of problem. It would be really no different if we had a different function. It's just a matter of plugging in wherever you see x in the original function. For part A, we're going to plug in where we see x. We're going to plug in, instead of x, we're going to plug in x plus h. And then the other two parts I'm going to do separately. So we're going to begin with part A. So for part A, we're going to begin with the function f of x equals 5x squared minus 7x plus 5. And in place of x, both times that it appears in that equation, we're going to substitute in x plus h. So to begin, I'm going to write the function f of x plus h is equal to, and in place of x, we're going to have x plus h and x plus h in two different places. So f of x plus h is equal to 5 times x plus h squared minus 7 times x plus h plus 5. So then f of x plus h is equal to 5, and the quantity x plus h squared, I want you to keep in mind that x plus h squared is equal to x plus h times x plus h. So the big thing to remember here before I go much further with this example is that you will please remember f of x plus h squared does not equal x squared plus h squared. That's very important. When you actually are doing this, you have to be sure that you understand that you're multiplying out the binomial x plus h times x plus h. So when you do that, x times x will give you x squared plus x and h has a product of x times h, and x and h has another product of x times h, plus h times h is h squared. So the truth is x plus h binomial squared is going to be x squared plus 2x times h plus h squared minus 7, and 7 of course is going to be multiplied times x, which will give us 7x, and 7 is also going to be multiplied times h, which is going to give us minus 7h, and then of course we have out here at the end plus 5. I'm sorry, that is not a 5, plus 5. Now we still have to distribute the 5 through the trinomial x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. So our next step is 5 times x squared is 5x squared plus 5 times 2 is 10x h plus 5 times h squared is 5h squared minus 7x minus 7h plus 5. And this is the quantity f of x plus h. You cannot combine any of these terms. All of these terms have different versions of the variable. There's only one constant term, and that's the 5. There's one x squared term, there's one h squared term, there is an x term, there is an h term, and then there is one term that is a number times the product of x and h. So none of those combine. Therefore, this is your final answer. And it cannot be simplified. So it has all of those terms. Now our next step is going to be to remember what all of this was, because the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to subtract the original function 5x squared minus 7x plus 5 from what we just got in that last step. So remember, what we got in the last step for x plus h was 5x squared plus 10x times h plus, I'm sorry, that was not a plus. Let me correct that before I mess up. That is positive, and that is plus 5 h squared, but in the next part, minus 7 times quantity x plus h was minus 7x minus 7h plus 5. So be absolutely sure that you actually copied down the right thing from the last step. F of x plus h is 5 times x plus h squared, which gave us this, minus 7 times x plus h gave us minus 7x minus 7h, and then we had plus 5 on the end of it. Now we're going to subtract f of x. So we're subtracting the entire quantity, 5x squared minus 7x plus 5. And when we do that, the easiest way to do that then is to take what we have here, and remember that what you're doing is you're subtracting this entire quantity. That's very important. So minus 5x squared and subtract negative 7x is going to be plus 7x, and minus a positive 5 is going to be minus 5. So in the end, when we actually do that subtraction, what happens is that the 5x squared term cancels, the minus 7x term cancels, and the 5 cancels, and this is what we have left. 10x x h plus 5h squared minus 7h. And this quantity is going to be used in the third step. 10xh plus 5h squared minus 7h. So now we'll move on to part C. So what I have just written down from the previous slide is the quantity f of x plus h minus f of x. And now we want to divide by h. And we're going to want to simplify that. And in order to simplify that, we need to remember that it is possible, since there is an h in every term in the numerator, it's possible for us to factor out that h. You cannot do the step that we're needing to do without first factoring out the common term, the common factor of h from all three of those terms. So when I factor out the h from 10xh, I have h times 10x minus, if I factor out one h, that leaves me with minus 5h, because h times negative 5h is negative 5h squared, so I'm simply factoring that out. And when I factor out the h from the 7, all I have left then in this part is the 7. So remember, you have to factor first. That has to come first. So now the equivalent expression is h times 10x minus 5h minus 7 over h. And we all know what happens next, and that is that h will be able to be removed as a common factor. So now we need to look at what's left. And what's left is just the part that's in the parentheses. So f of x plus h minus f of x divided by h is equal to 10x minus 5h minus 7, and that is then our final answer. And for those of you who had 1630 last semester, you actually did do this kind of problem in 1630. For those who came in because you had a higher ACT and did not take Math 1630, may not remember doing this, but you have done this before. It's just been a while. Now this last one is a little trickier to do. So all I'm going to do in this part is I'm going to mention to you that you're going to do this on the calculator. And the class notes are going to show you how to do it on the calculator. And number 2, this is a very important part of this. Don't worry about part D and E. because I'm going to give you credit for Part D and E anyway. You only need to worry about do parts A, B, and C on the TI 83 or TI 84. And I will show you how to do that separately in class. That way I can show everybody at once, and we will actually do this problem in class on Tuesday. See you in class.